This is New Caledonia, an archipelago of over 140 islands just a 2-hour flight off the coast of Australia in the middle of the South Pacific. The island chain is unlike any other on Earth. Each island is surrounded by the most breathtaking turquoise water with coral reefs and marine life unlike that found anywhere else. Each island in this chain is unique with its own plant life, animal life, and each with an extraordinary and rare habitat into itself. Each island we traveled to and explored was just like visiting another habitable planet. It's one of those places that so few humans have set foot on, and you really have to see it in person to fully appreciate its grandeur. But it's here on these islands that you will find a few of the most recognizable and popular geckos in the world. Crested geckos, leachies, gargoyle geckos, chahoua geckos, and so much more, some of which has never been filmed in the wild before. In early 2018, I, with a group of dedicated researchers, set out on an expedition unlike anything that I have ever experienced before or since. For 3 weeks, we toured remote islands off the coast of the mainland, Tar, some of which hadn't seen human footprints for decades. Each island offered up their own unique beauty, their own unique flora and fauna, and their own strange and fascinating secrets. We found that each island was very different from the others, each with its own locale of geckos and other wildlife, and some had gecko species that, to this day, we aren't quite sure if they've even been described by science yet. On other islands, we found species so rare that they were only the 5th living specimen actually seen in the wild, and I still remain the first person ever to film them in 4K in the wild to this day. New Caledonia is definitely a world unto itself, and in this recut of previously uploaded videos, I take you back to the islands and share an entirely new perspective on our tour, with never-seen-before footage of what remains the greatest and most rewarding once-in-a-lifetime trip to find and learn new secrets, show you amazing never-before-seen gecko behavior, the habitats and habits of how some of the world's most popular pet geckos are living in the wild here in the exotic islands of New Caledonia. The day after we arrived on the main island, Tar, we were back at another airport in the capital city of Noumea to hitch a flight down to the Isle of Pines, which is so far the only island known to have crested geckos. There's an old record of crested geckos being on Tar, but it was later debunked as records couldn't be substantiated. Unfortunately, we didn't spend a lot of time on the main island of Tar, although we did spend a day looking for gargoyle geckos, which are only found on the main island. The New Caledonian government claims that they protect their natural areas and their native flora and fauna, but everywhere we went within the gargoyle gecko's range, we found destroyed habitat from the ongoing nickel mining, and sadly, we weren't able to find them, nor did we find any of the giant leachies on the mainland. So the next day, we boarded a flight to head to the Isle of Pines to search for crested geckos. Over the 30-minute flight, which concluded 3 constant days of travel for us, I began to worry that we may have come all this way and not be able to find what we came for. We had planned this trip for 7 months before this, and our research on exactly where to go to find them was solid, and our optimism remained high that we would find my first crested geckos in the wild. And we had a solid plan in mind on how exactly we would find them. So after 3 days of traveling, we have just arrived on the Isle of Pines. Oh, look at this place. Excuse me, do you know where the crested geckos are? All right, so we figured out where we're going. We're here at the airport right now. We're going down to these towns to cash in money, pick up groceries, find a camp spot for the night, but this island is so small that it only takes an hour to drive around it. So anyway, we're loading up and on we go. The Isle of Pines was just as beautiful as I hoped it would be, and as we drove around the island, even though it was daytime, I still scanned the towering pines for crested geckos. I knew that crested geckos generally stay off the pines because they secrete a sticky sap, but that didn't stop me from scanning every tree.
All right, so let's go check out our accommodations for the evening here. I've never stayed in a grass hut before. Never stayed in one either. Is this for real? This can't be for real. Look at this. Is this really the door? You have to crouch to get in there? Look at this. Oh, that is the door. Wow. This ain't too shabby. Couple of beds. Look at that grass roof. All right, I don't know. I'll take this one, whatever. Thud, we're in. But look at that little hobbit door. This is me standing up, just normally. This is the top of the door to get in. That is not a door for tall Daves. But this is home for the night. And the mosquitoes are everywhere. They're gonna drive us nuts, dude. This place is already full of mosquitoes. So this is the town of Vau. It's basically the cultural center of the island. And this is the only bank on the island where we can cash our money. All right. Whoa, look at how pretty their money is. I swear, the US has the ugliest money in the world.
Our first night on Pine Island, we wasted no time in getting out into the field. This forest was unlike any place in the world I had previously been to. Almost every tree large enough to support them were being strangled by, albeit beautiful, but parasitic vines. This is the habitat that crested geckos live in, and obviously they have everywhere in the world to hide. So my optimism of actually finding one on our first night began to fade with every step through this incredible forest. That was until our first lizard was spotted within about 10 minutes of arriving at this spot.
Where is he? Got him. Got him.
You know it's going to be a good trip when the first gecko you spot is a chahoua gecko, and this one was bigger than those we usually see at reptile expos. So much so that at first we thought it might be a leachie, or possibly a rough-snouted gecko. But being about 40 to 50 feet up in a tree, we only got a brief glance to make an ID before he fled and we never saw him again.
Oh, there he goes.
That would sadly be the only chahoua gecko we would find on this trip. The researchers and I had done extensive research before this trip on exactly where to pinpoint crested geckos on this island. They seem to only be found in small pockets of suitable habitat and don't seem very widespread throughout the island. That's why so many have come here looking for them and never found them, and one of the reasons they were thought to be extinct until 1994. And within another hour or so, our planning and research had paid off. There, sitting in ambush mode on a branch, was what we came all this way to find, our first crested gecko in the wild. Look.
Wow, wow. That's amazing. How big.
That is fantastic. How unbelievably awesome is that?
There's a reptile expo that absolutely needs to be on your radar because it's all about the love and passion for reptiles. And if you've never been to one before, you are really missing out on one of the biggest reptile expos in the world. The Reptile Super Show is a celebration of all things reptile with access to thousands of reptiles as well as amphibians and turtles. You'll find all the lighting cages and all the supplies you'll need within the more than 100,000 square feet of space that makes this a must for every reptile enthusiast no matter where in the world you are. It's held in sunny Southern California twice a year in Pomona and once a year in Anaheim. This isn't just another reptile show, it's a Reptile Super Show. For more information, click the link in the description below. Wild crested geckos look very different from the ones we keep in our homes. They are longer bodied and their noses are also longer, and there's a reason for this. The first crested geckos that started the worldwide craze were a group of individuals brought back from an expedition in the early 1990s. From that group, almost every crested gecko you see at an expo or on a breeder's list or at your local reptile shop is a direct descendant of that original group, and therefore, over time, selective breeding has reshaped the way captive crested geckos look from their wild counterparts. Their colors are much more muted with more earth tones than those that we're used to seeing. Out here, they need to blend in and disappear in plain sight. The geckos we have in our homes are selectively bred to enhance their colors and patterns. Those geckos, if released back here in the wild, wouldn't last a single day as they simply wouldn't be able to blend in as these with more drab wild type coloration can.
This is a crested gecko in the wild here in New Caledonia. Of all the crested geckos that I've ever had in my hands, this one is the most significant. So crested geckos in the wild don't have any of the colors or patterns that the domesticated ones have. Crested geckos in the wild are completely uniform brown. Sometimes they have a red spot on their back flanks. This one does not. And as you guys probably know from the domesticated ones, they certainly have very elaborate eyelashes. As a matter of fact, the Latin name ciliatus actually is Latin for eyelash. So while we call these crested geckos, a more apt name for them would be eyelash geckos. So we've all seen that post out there that says, I'll give you $1 million or whatever for a credible photo of Bigfoot. Well, the same can apply to a wild crested gecko's tail. I would say 99.9% of all adult crested geckos in the wild have lost their tail. Because with crested geckos, it is so easy for them to lose their tail. Any loud noise such as thunder, pop, that tail comes off. Dogs barking too close, pop, that tail comes off. Low-flying planes, that tail is gonna come off. So as a lot of you know, the crested gecko was actually thought to be extinct until 1994, but they were looking for it in the wrong place. They were looking for it on Grande Terre. Nobody really looked for it on the Isle of Pines because the original record listed it as being right around Noumea on Grande Terre. But it wasn't. It was actually here on the Isle of Pines. And so after a typhoon in 1994, one of these fell into a research station, and there just happened to be a German herpetologist that recognized what it was and wrote the paper reintroducing the species into science in 1994. All right, so here we are walking around this incredible forest here in New Caledonia. What I'm looking for as I walk around is I'm looking for signs of what they're eating out here. Obviously, no one's out here giving them insects. No one's out here mixing up some Pangea crested gecko diet for them out here. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for signs of fruit being eaten, to see what they're eating out here. It's not going to be easy to find. But in talking with crested gecko keepers, I often hear that at certain times of the year, they're not interested in insect diet. And there's a reason for that out here. And it has to do with the seasons. There's not really seasons like we know in North America and Europe out here. There's two seasons. There's the rainy season and there's the dry season. And here in March in the southern hemisphere, this is actually autumn. So it's this time of year that all the fruit is ripe and some of it is really mushy on the vines and very easy for crested geckos to eat. And during this time of year, they're not really interested in going hunting for insects. They're looking for that overripe, mushy fruit that they so love to eat out here. And my theory is that even though the crested geckos that we have are domesticated, they still have that internal clock where certain times of the year, they're going to want Pangea crested gecko diet more than they're going to want insect food. And that at other times of the year, when the fruit isn't blooming out here in the wild, that's when they want their insect diet. It all has to do with the crested gecko's internal clock and what types of food they want at certain times of year. So let's talk a little bit about temperature and humidity out here in this forest. Certainly, temperature and humidity makes all the difference when keeping these reptiles in our domestic situation. So, I have my handy dandy Zilla temperature and humidity gauge, which reads 81 degrees and 80% humidity. So in our domestic situation, crested geckos need to be kept at 80% humidity, or right around there. And room temperature really isn't 81 degrees. But that's exactly what this is reading right now. And as far as just misting down your cages, I don't think that that's adequate enough to get it to 82% humidity that it is here on this island. So I'm taking issue with the thought that all you need to do is keep crested geckos at room temperature. So here in the middle of the night in New Caledonia, you can see that there's very little difference between the humidity levels and the temperature that there is in the daytime here. All right, so we just found another cresty, and this is a wild cresty with a full tail. That's almost unheard of. That's incredibly rare to find that. Okay, so we got a leachie here. This is on Isle of Pine, so this is an Isle of Pine leachie. Look at how big they are. So
Really big.
yeah, Isle of Pine leachies are one of the biggest leachies there are. Look at his belly. Nice and yellow. That's fantastic. All right, night herping here in New Caledonia, here on the Isle of Pines. That's awesome. All right, let's go see how many more we can find of these.
If you haven't heard of Palm Street yet, you've got to check this out. It's a new online marketplace where you can see your new reptile through either live streams or direct from the breeder listings. The best part is all sellers are vetted to ensure your new reptile is healthy, and there are even exclusive perks for new members and so much more. Palm Street makes shopping for your new reptile fun. Check them out for yourself by hitting the link in the description below.
So this, whoa, dude. So this is what the leachies look like on the Isle of Pines. Whoa. As I was saying, so this is what the leachies look like here on the Isle of Pines. They've got these big blocky heads, and they're bigger than all the other ones out there on the outer islands. And they've got this really high contrast background. Check out the white sides. They have thin white bands, and they have no black pigment in those white bands, unlike some of the other insular locales. But it makes sense that these are one of the biggest insular locales because the Isle of Pines is actually a really big island. And therefore, you have bigger trees, you have more of them, you have more space, you have a lot more food source here, and therefore, the competition for food isn't as great as it is on the smaller islands, and they can get a bunch of it and grow really super huge. They're not as big as the ones on Grand Tar, which is a much, much bigger island than the Isle of Pines, but here, these guys grow super big. So these guys can just sit and eat to their heart's content, and they eat big food on this island. A big island, big trees, big habitat, big food. So last night, as we were looking for these guys, check out what we filmed. All right, Leachie is eating a huge katydid.
Oh my god, I can't believe that!
Oh my god, it's bigger than he is.
I can't believe that.
Holy crap. Is he gonna get that thing down?
It dropped.
Oh, he dropped it.
It dropped.
All right, so the Leachie dropped this. It was obviously too big for him.
Grasshopper.
Yeah, it's a new Caledonian katydid. All right, so that's how big this katydid is, and that Leachie was trying to down this thing.
A leachie must be that.
And his head's a little screwy.
Where is the leachie?
The Leachie, I think, ran off.
I thought two leachies were fighting when I was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But a Leachie looking at this and saying that's food.
The jaw.
That is incredible.
Do it with my hand for scale.
Look at how big that thing is. That is pretty insane. Wow. I don't know how we're gonna top this, guys. I'm pretty much convinced that if he didn't drop that katydid, he would have gotten that thing down. So again, Isle of Pines leachies are the second biggest insular type of leachies and the most jumpy. So this is typical leachie habitat here on the Isle of Pines, but take a look at these trees. This is where we've been finding most of our leachies here. You have vertical trunks like every other tree, but on these trees, most of the branches and most of the tree is all horizontal. So with the leachies that you're keeping, you may want to try bigger cages for this bigger locale, but have vertical branches and horizontal branches within the same cage to give your bigger Isle of Pines locale leachie an option. So vertical branches and horizontal branches in the same enclosure would probably be ideal for this locale.
Having successfully found the crested geckos in this locale of Leachy, we didn't come all this way just to stay on the Isle of Pines. We wanted to explore the outlying islands, and to get there, we needed two things: a boat, and of course permission. The outlying islands like Morro and Bayonnaise are where we would find different localities of Leachianus geckos, but the internet wasn't really an option out here at the time, and therefore this part of the trip we couldn't plan as well. So we went from one tour guide to another to see if we could arrange a boat out to the islands we needed to go to.
Alright, so we've got to go in here and talk to them about getting a boat out to the islands we want to visit.
Each one told us they could take us, but first we needed to secure permission from the government because all those islands are all protected, and you simply can't take a boat and legally land on the islands, much less hike around and spend the night there. So for 2 days, we were stuck trying to find the right government official to talk to, but then learned that the outlying islands we wanted to go to were actually under the authority of the native peoples of New Caledonia, the Kanak people, a Melanesian ethnic group who are the original inhabitants of the archipelago and are thought to have colonized these islands for at least 3,000 years. The islands we needed to go to were still considered under control of the Kanak, but the French still believe that they control the islands. But out of respect for the original inhabitants, we chose to seek permission from the Kanak people, and therefore requested a meeting with the chief of the tribe. Once we assured him that we were not going to remove so much as a leaf from the island and all we wanted to do was photograph and film the lizards, he not only gave us the permission we needed, but offered to take us to each individual island himself on his personal boat.
Alright, so that is the chief, and that is his boat. And we're loading up right now. Here's food for the couple of weeks. I can't forget those.
Our friendship with the chief and his family grew from there. However, once the French authorities found out about it, we found ourselves in a bit of a political entanglement, and the French thus treated us like criminals when we returned to the capital of Noumea at the end of our expedition. But that's another story for later.
Well, that wasn't too bad. A boat ride, it's just on the other side of the little bay here, but we're going ashore right now. Nice. Okay. Alright, this is not what I would expect to find on a uninhabited island in the Pacific. Here's all our gear here. I think we're set for a couple of days out here. Alright, let's find some lizards. Check out that baby! Ah, the first sea crate. Look at that bad boy. Come here.
Paul Burns at Living Wild 2.0 has been breeding New Caledonian geckos since 2020. He works with over 300 geckos of all locales and morphs. To get one of his geckos, click the link below or come visit him at a reptile show near you.
So this is a venomous sea crate. They're kind of like a sea snake, but they're really docile. These guys are really common, so I'm sure we'll see many more of these. All right, buddy. Look at that flat tail they use for swimming. So this is a highly venomous snake, but look at this. I'm holding him by the tail. He is showing zero aggression. What a beautiful snake. This is the only snake species native to New Caledonia. There are no other snakes on New Caledonia, but look at how docile he is. Just a great little dude. All right, got camp set up. All right, so all that under a tarp because it's about to rain. Check this out. Look at how well that Australian tent, which is called a swag, is set up. Perfectly done. That's my sorry piece of shit over there. All right, this is what we're having for lunch. We have like 25 of these. This is all we're gonna be eating for the next 5 days. It's like ramen noodles in a bowl. It's gonna be tasty. That's life on the island. At least we're not eating raw fish that we just caught. So Ewan gives presentations on reptiles to the Australian military, and instead of paying him cash, they pay him in like military K rations. So look at that, noodles, sweetened condensed milk, instant mashed potatoes. Oh, chocolate ration. All right, that's good. Sports drink powder. This is dehydrated Gatorade. Look at this. That's just amazing. Non-dairy creamer, all right, fine. Oh, this is jelly in a tube. Yeast extract. This is Vegemite in a tube. They don't even call it Vegemite, it's yeast extract. It's absolute diseased dog fecal matter in a tube. Ugh, gross. Cheddar cheese in a can. Fantastic.
When you're in the bush,
oh yeah, look at that. That's what the military provides its soldiers, little heart cookies.
Brokeback Mountain.
That's right.
Once we had our camp set up and had our noodles and heart cookies for lunch, I explored the island and made friends with the 7-foot gray reef sharks that were constantly patrolling the island. All we had to do now was wait until dark so we could go find the Isla Brosse population of leachies. We had been told that we would never see them out here, that they were strictly nocturnal and they'd be so high in the canopy we'd never see them. And sitting around camp was getting boring, so we ventured out into the woods and almost immediately proved wrong the notion that they were all high up in the canopy and only seen at night. In fact, they were pretty much everywhere and extremely common, and not one did we see on this island or any of the others that were more than 4 or 5 feet off the ground, clinging directly to the trunks of trees.
This is what the leachies look like on Isla Brosse. And for us leachy enthusiasts, this is also known as Isle D. And for all the insular leachies, these are some of the biggest on this island. And this guy is not even close to full grown. But they are some of the most beautiful leachies on this island. I know I'm going to say that about every leachie on every island we visit, but look at their belly. They have a little bit of yellow coloring to their belly, but look at the bars on him. They're made up of all these little individual white spots. This is just one gorgeous Leachianus. So Leachianus geckos not only have the sticky toe pads that other geckos have, but they have little hooks on each one of their fingers, and there's a kind of a superstition amongst the Kanak people, which are the indigenous people here in New Caledonia, that if the Leachianus grabs onto you and sticks those hooks into you and you rip it off of you, it actually rips your soul right from your body. So still to this day, there's a number of indigenous people here in New Caledonia that are actually afraid of these geckos. You know, this Leachianus would cost probably upwards towards $1,000. But you know what I'm gonna do with him? I'm gonna put him right back on the tree where I found him, because really, there's enough of these being captively bred so that there never needs to be a reason for somebody to come here and take these out of the wild again. So this guy just took a dump here, and these are seeds. We're not sure exactly what kind of seeds they are, but here in March, which is autumn here, they're eating fruits. And there's no evidence in its dump here that it's eating insect matter. This is all fruit matter.
Having found the leachy locale on Isla Brosse, which again was a lot easier than I expected it to be, the chief picked us up and we headed to the next island over, which has another population locale of leachy. This is the tiny island of Isle Moreau, and it's here that we discovered that the look of the island was vastly different than Isla Brosse.
All right, we've made it ashore on Isle Moreau. Look at these guys clearing out the boat like that. Oh, I gotta go help them. All right, now we got to get all of this stuff all the way down the beach where we're going to camp. Whew. So every one of these islands is actually different. There's different trees, different rock formations, different beaches. It's something very strange because the islands are so close together, but the landscape is so different from one island to another. But right now we've got to kind of scope out a place to camp here. Otherwise, we're going to have to just camp right here on the beach, and we're not sure, you know, where the high tide mark is. So we could be sleeping and the tide could come in and, well, that would be the end of our expedition. But there's a couple of clearings, but it's not really all that ideal. Like this. This isn't too bad. It's kind of shady. I like this. I like this a lot. So it's getting to be midday. We're getting kind of hungry, and you don't pack a lot of food in here, you simply can't. So you eat what you find in the ocean, And we eat what we find on the ground. So right now it's lunchtime of coconuts. Is your thumb still attached?
Yep. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Very bad fun, but yeah. And then just
There we
wash
go.
it out. And away you go.
Fantastic.
But the trees and all other plants were completely different and unique to this island. And like on Isla Brosse, the leachies here were not hard to find at all. The leachies on this island are known for their peach purple color on their flanks and more pronounced yellow coloration on their heads. So here on Moro, which is Isle E for all you lychee enthusiasts, this is what the leachies look like here in the wild. Now, he's not very flamed right now, but he does have that peach purple sides. But these geckos very rarely reach over a foot long. They're one of the smaller locality morphs of leachies. Note the squared off snout and the predominant ridge from the eye to the nose, which is one of the diagnostic features of leachies from here on Moro. So last night, as we were walking around the jungle looking for these guys, I never bring my expensive camera equipment out with me because it's all rocky, sharp coral with these pitfalls, and there's all these vines, and if I fall or catch my camera on a vine, it's all over. So I never take my equipment out. Woo! I never take my equipment out when I'm looking for these guys at night. But as we were looking around for these guys last night, we found something absolutely incredible, and so I pulled out my phone and filmed, and I really think that this is the first time in history that this kind of behavior was documented in the wild. Check this out.
Introducing Terra Tents, the ultimate lightweight enclosure for reptiles and plants. Designed to fit perfectly into a standard baker's rack, Terra Tents are built for convenience, durability, and performance. Check out the zipper doors. Smooth, secure, no more struggling with Velcro. On top, a strong metal support grate keeps your setup safe and stable. You can customize your habitat with Velcro backgrounds while the metal support rods lock it all together for strength you can trust. Need airflow? The adjustable aluminum screen vents with Velcro closures put you in control. And thanks to the clear 12-gauge plastic panels, you'll always have a crystal view of your reptiles or propagating plants. Power cords, no problem. Built-in grommets keep everything neat and functional. Lightweight, sturdy, versatile, that's the Terra Tent. Built for keepers, trusted by growers. Upgrade your rack today with Terra Tents.
So we just came upon this male sitting right in this bush, just directly off the ground, which is very uncommon for leachies. But even with us standing around him, he's just sitting there. We couldn't figure out why until 3 feet later we found this. This could be the first documented leachie nest, and it's the males that are standing here guarding it. And there they are, just laid right on the ground. There's no substrate that they're using. It's just directly on the ground in moist leaves, right under a rock here. No vermiculite. Just right out on the ground. Bugs crawling all over them. Doesn't even bother them. They haven't split yet, so these have just been laid pretty recently.
There's no humus on it, or humus stains.
No,
or
but I
anything?
was going to say that it's, for me, almost ready to
Hatch? No,
Oh.
the egg will split with ridges.
Yeah, so
Before
the
it
one
hatches?
we found was all lining.
These are fresh laid eggs. That is just phenomenal. So we've been sitting here filming for a couple of minutes now. There's the nest right there. There's the leachie. We're all standing around taking photos. This male is still vigilantly standing guard over that nest with 5 potential predators standing around him. He hasn't budged.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it's really unusual to
I
have
mean, I
this.
pointed that one out. I never looked for anything.
How long? What's the distance from here to that tree?
Where was the male?
The male leachie. Hi. Can I help you?
Hello.
Hello.
Okay,
You
listen,
sit on your foot. Look at this guy. He just went right up to my foot.
Watch how he really reacts to the sheer word.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, look. Bye. Have a nice day. But he stood right up. I mean, he was going to pounce.
He reacts.
Yeah, he reacted. So the male is here in this bush, and less than 3 feet away is the nest being guarded by a male, and the female is nowhere to be found around here. This seriously could be the first time that this has ever been documented in the wild. So what do you guys think? I think we just documented that the males, at least here on Moro, are the ones who are guarding the eggs. Again, I don't think that's ever been documented in the wild, but for right now, we are going to let this guy go exactly where we found him. Woo! And he is ready to go right now. So look at the trees here on Moro. Even though each one of these islands is close together, each one has its own ecosystem with its own different flora and fauna. It's just bizarre. I've never seen anything like this before, but here on Moro, look at these trees. They're vertical and they're horizontal and they twist and they turn and they go all different directions. So if you're keeping leachies from this locale and you're keeping them in a vertical display, that's all right. But also, you might want to try a horizontal display, because what the leachies are doing is they're hanging out on the horizontal branches more than we're seeing them on the vertical branches. So just kind of food for thought. I think it's a big mistake that we're keeping leachies in the exact same way despite what locale they're coming from. Each locale here in New Caledonia is very different from the other ones.
The next day we left Moro for the next island over, and one that will be familiar to those who are into lychee locales, the island of Bayonnaise. This was by far the most difficult island to visit because there are no beaches to land a boat, so we literally had to drop anchor and tie us to a tree on the island to keep us from smashing into the rocks, then had to unload all of our gear piece by throwing all of our gear up onto the rocks, and then having to sort it out and organize it once we were unloaded. But that wasn't the hard part. We had to jump from the boat onto land and try to land in a way that we didn't cut ourselves open on the jagged rock and fragments of sharp coral. And that didn't go as well as we hoped.
Well, this sucks.
Oh, it just sucks.
Oh, looks like I'm gonna have to go wash off in the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And with my blood pouring out into the water, it didn't take long for the black-tip reef sharks to take notice and come within mere feet of me to investigate. And they patrolled the island for the entire time we were there. But exploring deeper into the interior of the island, we again discovered that the habitat here was very different from the other islands. Bayonnaise seemed less tropical, vastly different from what you'd expect to find on a small deserted island in the South Pacific. But like the other islands, the leachies were abundant and clinging vertically to the tree trunks, but here, their coloration helped them blend into the unique coloration of the trees on this island. Being that every island has its own unique flora, that's one of the varied reasons why these locale leachies look so different from island to island.
Bayonnaise is also known as Isle C, and this is what the leachies here look like. They don't really look like the Bayonnaise that we see in the hobby, but they do have the side bandings that they do, but here in the wild, they don't seem to support the colors that we often see in the hobby. But they're still cool geckos. They're a medium-sized gecko on this locale. And the first leachies that I ever had were Bayonnaise locale leachies. And so for me to be standing here on this island with a wild Bayonnaise leachie in my hand, I just simply don't have the words to describe just how amazing this is. To be holding the first leachie that I ever got here in the wild. So Leachianus geckos are actually the most vocal geckos in the world. They make whistles and clicks and growls. So Leachianus lizards are extremely long-lived lizards. They can live up to 30 years. And what's particularly interesting about Leachianus is that they pair bond, kind of like shinglebacks in Australia. They'll find a mate and they'll stick with that one mate on that one tree or one group of trees almost all of their lives. So look at the coloration of this female. This is really typical of the coloration on Bayonnaise. So the interesting thing about this particular leachie is she's gravid at this size. So if she's gravid at this size, that just goes to show that the Bayonnaise type locale is a much smaller gecko than some of the other insular geckos here in New Caledonia. All right, I'm gonna go gently put her back in the tree hollow that I found her in. So look at this grove of trees here on Bayonnaise where we've been finding most of our leachies. All the trees are vertical, even the tops of the trees are vertical. So if you have a vertical setup for your leachies, especially from Bayonnaise, you're doing it right. But all the leachies spend the entire day in tree hollows. That's where they hide out, they cram themselves in there, they spend all day in these tree hollows. So if you don't have cork bark tubes in your enclosures, go get some of those cork bark tubes and put it in your enclosures. You're gonna have much more secure, happier, healthier leachies.
Morph Market is the #1 online marketplace for all your reptiles and amphibians. You can search through over 60 categories to find your perfect new pet, whether it's the latest boa constrictor morph or your 150th crested gecko. It's all right here at one place, Morph Market. Out of all the islands we toured on our expedition, we didn't just encounter crested geckos and leachies on every island we went to. New Caledonia is actually teeming with life, and most of that is reptiles. It seemed everywhere we walked, something was scurrying away in the undergrowth with every step we took.
And New Caledonia is dominated by lizards. In fact, every lizard here is either a skink or a gecko. In fact, of the 67 species of reptiles found in New Caledonia, 59 of them are endemic, meaning they're found here and nowhere else on Earth. And all the species within the genus Rhacodactylus are found right here in New Caledonia. So here in this forest, the ground is totally alive with these little skinks called speckled litter skinks. They're like the ground skinks found in the southeastern United States. Every step I take, like 5 of them skitter out of my way. Skitter's a word. Hanging out, sunning himself on the end of this bush is a green-bellied tree skink. We're seeing these things everywhere, not just on this island, but on all the islands that we visited on this trip. They're a very successful skink because not only can they live in all the old-growth forests on the islands and on this island and on the mainland, but they can also live in disturbed soil, so around houses and farmland. They do just fine in that kind of scenario. This is a diurnal and arboreal skink. Very rarely are these ever seen on the ground. So hanging out right there is a Pacific slender-toed gecko. They're usually nocturnal, but every once in a while they don't conceal themselves very well, and they'll sit out in the little crevices of a decaying log like this one is right now. And right now we're on Moreau, Island Moreau. We came to this island for a very specific reason and for a very specific lizard. And that's this guy. This is a lesser rough-snouted gecko. But this gecko is extremely unique in that it's one of the only live-bearing geckos on the planet. The other one is in New Zealand. Females of this species give birth to 2 live babies at a time instead of laying eggs like other geckos. So coming to this particular island and finding this particular species was extremely high on our wish list. And last night we found about 6 or 7 of these, which tells us that these are actually pretty common here in this habitat on this very small island. But these are just absolutely amazing and unique geckos. Woohoo! You want to just go there for a while? Okay, he's gonna sit there for a while. So it's kind of obvious why this is called the rough-snouted gecko. Take a look at the difference between the males and the females. The males have those ridges all the way across the head, whereas the females only have it on the front part of the head. Why? I have no idea, but there is definitely sexual dimorphism amongst this species.
Isle Nana was the smallest island we toured, and we chose it because previous to us going there were few records of anyone going to this island before to explore the reptile life that may be there. You'd think that it being such a small island, nothing would live there, but that definitely wasn't the case. It may be that to this day, we were the only group of researchers to ever spend the night here and conduct a survey of the nocturnal reptiles that live on this tiny island. As time went on, we were running out of food and had to rely more on what we could find to eat in the forests and pull out of the ocean. And so the chief then taught us how they fish on the island. He told us even the locals only come to this island to fish, so no one was really sure what kind of reptile life actually lives here on Isle Nana. So that night, we began to plan out how we were going to cover as much of this island as we could.
Okay, so what's the plan of attack here? So
So the island's like that.
right?
My 4 fingers are 4 people. You gotta walk along the island like that.
Just kind of like a deer drive in northern Minnesota. Got it.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a spread.
Yep, good plan. Okay, here we go. Excuse us, buddy. So these birds around here are called mutton. They're also called shearwaters or petrels. And they're ground nesting seabirds, but they're nocturnal and they just kind of run around and they nest in the ground like this. So we got to kind of be careful of where we're walking here. Yeah, you can just step right on these guys if you're not careful. Oh, hey, go, hey, Alright, so we just found this bovia here. We're not sure yet if it's the same species as on the other islands or not, so we're gonna have to key this out, but he looks a little different actually. Very cool little find. Alright, we're gonna key him out and see what else is on this island.
As it turned out, we couldn't find a match to this particular bovia gecko on any other island, so this could be a never-before-described species. Still, 8 years after this was filmed, the jury is still out on if this was in fact a new species, and that's why it takes so long to describe new species for science. You have to be absolutely sure of your findings before you publish the paper, otherwise it will be debunked and your reputation will take a punch. We wanted to try and take DNA samples to be sure, but we had made a promise to the chief that we wouldn't take any animals or even any blood samples of any of the animals off the island, and we chose to keep our word even if it meant not being sure if we had a new species in our hands or not. We hiked the entire island only finding the same bovia geckos, but at the end, I noticed something peculiar in a tree. This is another New Caledonian sea krait, and as I mentioned, these are highly venomous snakes that have the equivalent of cyanide for venom, and it's one of the fastest acting venoms in the animal kingdom. These snakes spend the majority of their time in the ocean hunting its main prey item, fish, and that's why its venom has to work so fast. It doesn't do the snake any good to bite a fish and then give it time to swim far away before the venom does its job. But previous to this encounter, it was always thought that these snakes live a purely terrestrial and mostly aquatic life, rarely venturing any further up the beach than the tree line, and it was thought that these snakes eat fish exclusively. So what was this one doing up in a tree? And not only that, but it was clearly in hunting mode. It was clearly searching for something. And if this behavior wasn't strange enough, they have bodies more suited for swimming and not for climbing. I watched this snake for about an hour trying to figure out what it was doing in a tree, and sadly I never found the answer. It's just another mystery that these islands hold, and one that demands much more field work before we finally have these questions answered. On one of the islands that we toured, we knew a lizard that was unlike any other lizard in the world, in habits and its ferocity. If you're smaller than this lizard, it's a nightmare on 4 legs, and to say it's one of the rarest lizards in the world is an understatement. So much so that before our expedition here, there had only been 4 sightings of a living specimen, and we weren't leaving these islands until we found the 5th one.
So what we're looking for out here is one of the most critically endangered lizards in the world, Phoboscinctus bocordi, otherwise known as the terror skink, and it really lives up to its name, terror. This guy is the T-Rex of this environment, exactly the way that T-Rex was king of his environment. This lizard is a meat eater. It preys on little leachies and other little skinks that are on this island, and it hunts them down, and there is no other animal out here that is the top of the food chain like this particular lizard is. And if you are a little skink or a little leechie, it really is a terror. So today is our last day on the island, and we've been looking for this lizard for the 2 days that we've been on this island, and the chances of us finding this lizard, it is critically endangered. We have no idea what its population is on this island. We have no idea how many are left. But before this excursion, there was only 1 or 2 known photographs of this lizard. It has only been rediscovered by science since 2002. Before that, it was thought to be completely extinct. And this is its habitat. So it's this kind of herping that is really tough. You know, you're out here in the sun, you get sunburnt, but it is all worth it if we find and I can film this very critically endangered lizard. The more I talk about it, the more I'm really worried we might not find it, because I don't think we're ever going to be out to this island again. We've got one shot at this. What do you see? A tree? I don't see any trees. Holy crap. Look at that. Right along the edge of the trail. Just this big sinkhole that probably goes down at least 15-20 feet. Yikes. So the terror skink is a diurnal species. They are out here hunting little leachies and other lizards that are nocturnal during the daytime when those lizards are asleep. They just pick them off one by one in the daytime. Like I said, this lizard has really lived up to its name, terror skink. It's the same thing as a shark patrolling the reefs in the ocean. And when they come up on a fish and those teeth sink into that fish is a goner. So it is with the lizards that the terror skink hunts during the daytime. But in all of our research for the past couple of months before we came on this expedition, we've traced it to this island, and we've traced its habitat to these kinds of forests. So we have a very good chance of finding it. And you know, when you're looking for something this rare, if you don't find it, you really can't be that disappointed. But if you do find it, man, I seriously can't think of another point in my life to where I would be so just ecstatic to find this in the wild. But we've been out here for a couple hours now. I don't know. Whoa. That one goes down at least 40 or 50 feet. Literally right on the edge of the trail. Damn. This is what it's like looking for a proverbial needle in a haystack. This is what it's like looking for a critically endangered lizard, that you have a basic idea of where it is and how to find it, but of course you're not 100% sure. I'm usually a very optimistic guy, but I can hear part of the group over there and part of the group over there, and I'm taking the middle. But so far, I'm checking every one of these trees. I don't know that we're gonna find it, guys.
This is Oint Reptile. From deep New Caledonian expeditions to cutting-edge genetics in Korea, June isn't just breeding geckos, he's redefining them. If you're searching for something rare, passionate, and different, click on his link in the description below and follow his journey. Oint Reptiles, where passion meets discovery. We searched and hiked in circles for most of the day, finding little in the interior of the island. And just as it goes, almost every time we were about to admit defeat, someone calls out and detonates your adrenaline.
There, right there in the crotch of the tree.
I got it, I see it. So this skink is the top predator here on this island in New Caledonia. There's no doubt that this guy is the T-Rex of this island. He fills the same ecological niche as the lions of the Serengeti. He is the top predator, but look at this. Something bit this guy's tail. Could be another Phoboscinctus. Or there could be something else out here that is the top predator that we don't know about. Other skinks have needle-like teeth. This guy has teeth that are flat and serrated, and they point backwards, just like a shark. This guy is well equipped to be not only the top predator on this island, but to be a meat eater. He's probably hunting baby leachies as his primary food. And we have no idea how common these are here. We have no idea what the population is here. This guy was thought to be extinct previous to 2002. So we have no idea how common he is. What we do know is that this one exists, and in the last hour of the trip, we found him. Just absolutely incredible. This is one of the crew that I'm out here with. This is Quetzal Dwyer.
Hi, how are you? This is a lizard that I've dreamed about seeing in the flesh my whole life. It's got a similar morphology to some of the Australian monitors, such as Tristis, which specialize in eating lizards, but it also has a face similar to some of the Central American anguids, which are predators of heavy invertebrates, such as crabs and millipedes. So few have ever been collected, so this is a real privilege to have this animal in my hands. This is, to me, the most, by far the rarest lizard I've ever held in my hand. And This is something I've wanted to see my whole life, and it didn't disappoint.
Yeah, I agree.
It didn't disappoint, although I would be a lot happier if I saw that the island was crawling with them.
Right.
That's
Wow.
the only disappointment.
In the what, 48 hours that we have on this island to even find one in the first place?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
No, that's
no
incredible.
way. No way. We got very, very lucky.
Yes, we did. Guys, wait a minute. Before we let him go, let's just take a second and just take a mental snapshot of this moment right now and what we have here. All right, good job.
Okay, so now we're gonna let her go.
Yeah, let's send her back to New Caledonia.
This is for the record. This is exactly where we found her. Okay, and away you go. You've treated us well.
Thank you.
Now she doesn't want to go.
Thank you, Phobos Skinctus. I cannot begin to describe how just absolutely excited and elated and invigorated I am for finding that lizard out here on these islands in New Caledonia. And to make it even more just absolutely incredible is that was the 5th known specimen ever found in the wild by Western science. Number 5. Can you imagine coming to a place like this and seeing a lizard so rare that in the past 120 or so years, only 5 living specimens have ever been found? Let that sink in for a second. Only 5 living specimens have ever been found in the past 120 years, and that was one of them. But then I stop and think about the reality of this, that before we came out here, there was only 2 or 3 known photographs of this incredibly rare lizard. And now that we've been here, there are tons of photographs, but now I can honestly say that I am the first person in the world to have 4K footage of this lizard. I have no words to describe how I feel right now about that. The first person in the world to film this lizard in the wild in 4K. I just need a moment to process that. That was just absolutely incredible.
New Caledonia is one of the most naturally enriched places in the world, and it most definitely was the trip of a lifetime. The discoveries we made there taught us so much about how 2 of the world's most popular pet geckos are living in the wild, and how the ecosystems of these islands truly function. We made lifelong friends with some of the most generous and friendly people we have yet met, but sadly, I will never return to these islands. And that story that I said earlier that I'd save for later? Well, when the French government found out that we went to the islands with the Canuck, they detained us at the airport when we returned to the capital city of Nouméa, and they held us for hours, accusing us of being smugglers and telling us we were to be arrested and jailed without any evidence. They questioned us, searched and photographed us and our luggage, and in the end, when it was apparent we weren't smugglers, they told us next time to go through the proper authorities and begrudgingly let us go. It was all a political ploy to somehow punish us for being respectful to the rightful custodians of the islands. But even so, of all my travels to wild places around the world, New Caledonia was a trip I'll never forget. The beauty, the wildlife, and the work we did and the knowledge we returned with would make every hardship we endured extremely worthwhile to be one of the first to thoroughly explore these amazing islands.